Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dallin and I've been loving all the 3 specs of Rogue in the World of Warcraft Legion beta. I've been enjoying playing all 3 of them, Assassination, Subtlety, and Outlaw. I think all 3 of them are fun and they're great, and it's interesting changes that are coming to World of Warcraft, especially in Legion. Now, we are in the beta, so, you know, changes are probably going to happen in the future. Some things might get nerfed, some things might get buffed. Some things might get completely changed. Hell, rogues might come out to be casters by the end of the expansion release. So anything can change the beta. But I decided, like, while we have a general understanding of what Subtlety is supposed to be, what Assassination is supposed to be, and Outlaw, and just basically how they feel, how much damage they deal, I feel like it's a good time to make a video ranking the 3 specs of rogues in my personal opinion. I'm going to rank them from worst to best, and I'm going to mainly rank them for PvP purposes. Now, before I go on any further, I want to make sure you guys know this is an opinion-based video. My opinion does not mean facts of life. You may agree with my opinion, and that is awesome, and we can have a discussion about it. But also you can disagree with my opinion, the full thing or parts of it, and I'm fine to have a discussion about that as well in the comments. But this is just my opinion and how I feel, so please don't take it too close to heart. Don't get all upset just because you don't agree with me. Let's get on to the video. I'm going to rank all the 3 specs of Rogue, again, from worst to best for PvP. Mostly, just mainly PvP constraints, because I'm really all about PvP in World of Warcraft. I'm not thinking leveling, I'm not thinking raids, no dungeons, mostly strictly for PvP. I'm going to rank him in terms of damage and burst, mobility, crowd control, artifact weapon, utilities besides burst and crowd control, survivability, as well as the feel of the spec. Now, the feel of the spec isn't going to impact how I rank the spec. This is just going to be my personal notes of how I felt playing all the 3 specs of Rogue. Just to let you guys know how I felt, since this is an opinion-based video. I'm going to rank all the categories between numbers 1 through 5, and I'm going to try to, I guess, assign a number that fits for all 3 specs of Rogues, but also how does this number fit with other specs of other classes. Like, how does it fit with warriors or death knights or monks? Like, for example, rogues aren't going to get 5 in mobility because there's other classes like monks, demon hunters, and warriors that have better mobility than rogues, but rogues can get a number 4. So that's basically how I'm going to do things. Number 1 being the worst, number 5 being the best, and it's not like only one spec can be number 5. Lots of specs can be up there on number 5, just kind of how I rank them all in my personal opinion. So let's get on to the video. I'm going to try to consider this the best I can. Let's get on to the very first spec. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Let's get to it. So let's start off with the first spec. It's Outlaw. And again, I'm ranking this from worst to best. But when I say worst, I don't mean worst with the rest of the other specs of all the classes. I'm not saying Outlaw is just garbage at PvP. I'm just saying it's not quite as good as Assassination or Subtlety. But it has some potential, so bear with me. The numbers that I gave for Outlaw in terms of damage and burst is a 2 for both of them. The sustained damage felt like it was alright. It was okay. It felt like you had to get some buffs and get an enemy in a stun in order to start seeing some real progress, but it didn't feel super overpowering, which is something we do see with combat rogues in WoD. Now, for burst, you kind of need a lot of buffs to line up together, and the burst does feel a bit clunky because of its mechanics, and you do need a roll from roll the bone, so getting that buff together is also adds to the clunkiness mechanic of Outlaw. It definitely is a strong burst, but it's like a haymaker. You can kind of see it from a mile away, and as a good healer will see all the buffs coming out for Outlaw. They'll know when to pop defensive cooldowns, or even just to CC the rogue until the duration of his cooldowns is over. On mobility tree, Outlaw scored a number 2 as well. The only thing you have for mobility as an Outlaw is sprint. That is the only thing you should get baseline. That's it. Yes, you can talent into some of the variations for mobility, like grappling hook, which works a lot like a enhanced heroic leap in a way. It basically gets you around the map on battlegrounds or arenas somewhat easier than a heroic leap. It can go to like edges of like a bridge or something on certain arena maps. But I feel like a Shadow Step is a better version of a grappling hook. Yes, grappling hook, you can choose where you want it to take you, but a Shadow Step will get you to your friendly or to an enemy in a blink of an eye, compared to a grappling hook which needs to extend to an area, then launch you to it, which takes a little bit of time. Compared to a Shadow Step, I feel like Shadow Step is overall more effective for PvP altogether. Now, when it comes to crowd control, Outlaw actually scores a pretty high 4, a pretty solid 4. This spec has a range stun, gouge, sap, cheap shot, blind. You can get dismantle in place of a blind, and you can even get pillage, which takes off enemies' damage by 20% and their health by 20%, and then you get 20% increased damage and 20% increased health. So you basically can peel for your friendlies at a moment's notice and use that as an offensive capability. So with a ranged stun, a ranged blind, a dismantle, a pillage, sap, gouge, like you actually have the most amount of CC capability out of any rogue spec in the game. The only thing you did lose is a silence, but you can always roll blood off in order to get yourself that AoE silence or AoE interrupt. So then you actually be kind of gaining that CC that you lost as a spec. But that's where Outlaw does excel, in CC department. The artifact for the Outlaw Rogue is actually pretty dope. It basically acts like a mark for death. So the way you would use it is you would activate it, and every time you would use a finisher, it would take off a little bit of health, but every time you use pistol shot or saber slash, you get 5 common points. So it acts like a mark for death, and the utility of mark for death is insane. This weapon also offers capabilities for cooldown reduction with all the passives that you get, which is an interesting concept, and that's basically how you burst. Imagine using all your defensives and offensives at the same time, getting your CD reduction buff from all the bones, and after a few finishes, you basically get your cooldowns back. So just imagine using Cloak of Shadows, using Riposte, then getting Roll the Bones, Adrenaline Rush, Saber Slash, Run Through, Saber Slash, Run Through, and then Saber Slash, Run Through, and bam! Your Adrenaline Rush, Riposte, and Cloak are off of cooldown. Just like that. It's kind of insane. Now, in terms of utility, Outlaw is actually a really big team player. There's a lot of abilities that you can grab that work together with your team. You can give everybody a health stone, you can speed up friendlies when you stun a target, you can get free adrenaline rushes around anybody who is polymorphed or stunned, you can give your friendlies haste every time you use Roll the Bones, and you can even tricks your friendlies, literally use Tricks of the Trade, in order to give yourself 15% extra damage and your friendly 15% increased damage for a short duration every time you have tricks available. Like, Outlaw actually has a lot of team capabilities, so I could see it being the spec to roll for Battlegrounds, rated Battlegrounds, and even 3's arenas. Survivability is another thing that Outlaw somewhat excels at. I give it a solid 4. This is one of the strong suits for Outlaw, simply because you can get Jolly Roger and Crimson Vial together to provide you great self-heals. You can also maintain yourself with Cloak, and a Cloak will basically heal you for every single dot that it removes. So if you go on a BG, get multi-dotted by all the Warlocks in the world, and then you Cloak, you can literally heal yourself for 1,000,000 and recover all your health after being rotted to death. You can also have a chance for run-throughs, which is your replace for Eviscerate, your chance for run-through to do AoE damage, and will heal based on how many players it hits with the AoE. So there's a lot of AoE capabilities for Outlaw altogether. And now for my personal impression of Outlaw. I feel like it's a good spec and it's a lot of fun. For the longest time I thought that, hey, you know, the whole idea of combat is just gonna fade away, and they're just, Blizzard was tossing my favorite spec away, man. I'm never gonna be able to play my favorite spec ever again. But in reality, they actually just gave us almost like a better spec. Between us using Saber Slash and shooting my gun, I'm actually having a blast playing as Outlaw. I'm using Roll the Bones often, and yes, it is RNG based, and a lot of people are going to complain about the aspects of its RNG, like, oh, you know, it's not dedicated, you're not going to get the right buffs when you need them. But that is also part of the fun of playing the spec. That is actually the part of the fun of the mechanic. The way I look at it is like, life is like a box of Roll the Bones. You never know which buff you're gonna get, and I feel like it adds on to the fun of the game. Yes, in competitive matter, the whole RNG aspect might just turn people off and just make people not want to play Outlaw ever. And people will probably something like Assassination or Subtlety. But still, Outlaw, I had a blast with it. If I could, you know, if I was thinking about the spec, like, oh man, this is going to be a boring spec, I'm going to have some buffs and Roll the Bones, some stupid whatever, and then I end up enjoying it, I feel like you guys might too. So I feel like if you guys enjoyed Combat Rogue, you might end up enjoying Outlaw as much as I do. But that's just my thoughts. Let's move on to the other specs on the list. The next spec on the list is Assassination, and oh my god, did Blizzard do it right, at least in my personal opinion. Yeah, there's some disadvantages to playing as Assassination, and I will go over them as the video goes on. But the spec is so much fun, and I feel like for the fantasy that we're expecting, which is like a warlock with daggers kind of deal, I think Blizzard done a good job. So let's get onto the list. Now when it comes to damage and burst, I feel like for damage I gave 4, and for burst I gave a 5, a solid 5. Assassination deals a lot of sustained damage. You have so many dots, so many various of dots, and once you stack them all together, you really are melting people. It's actually kind of overwhelming to play Assassination, because between your PvP talents and your normal class talents, there's actually a lot of combinations for you to choose, whether you want to roll this build or that build, or maybe you want to go bursty. or maybe you want to go really dot heavy. It doesn't even matter which build you end up going. They're all a ton of fun, and I enjoyed every single second of playing Assassination. One of the best advantages of Assassination is once you get all your buffs lined up, all your bursts, there's nowhere for the enemy to run. Once you have your dots ticking, it doesn't matter if the trinket, it doesn't matter if the puppet defensive, just watching them drop to your damage over time while you're just running away to safety, it's such a strong and cool feeling altogether. And it's just very good to see really strong dedicated burst and damage for Assassination spec. For mobility, Assassination scores a 3 because it doesn't have as much mobility as a Subtlety rogue, but it has more mobility than an Outlaw. What you have for mobility is Shadow Step and Sprint, which provide effective mobility capabilities that we saw in WoD. Pretty straightforward, and I gave this one a 3. Now in the CC department, Assassination scored a 2, a pretty low 2. Mainly because the CC is lacking. Without having a blind or a gouge, it made me fumble a couple of times on my keyboard when I'm trying to get a blind on a target and I remember, oh wait, I don't have a blind. Or if a caster is casting and I just use my kick and I interrupt the cast, it's like, oh, I wish I had a gouge. So you kind of miss this kind of basic CC that you are so used to having. The only effective CC you have are Cheap Shot, Corrode, and Kidney. And Kidney, I wouldn't even count as CC because in most cases you're using Kidney to line up on your target. You're using Kidney in order to either enhance your damage or put a strong bleed on the enemy. So because Kidney is such an offensive based ability, you can't really off Kidney somebody. So the only CC you have is Vanish Sheep or Vanish Corrode, which kind of sucks for Assassination. You do have a lot of damage, you do have a lot of burst, which kind of offsets the fact that you don't have that much CC, but it still does kind of suck and it is still a problem for Assassination. The artifact weapon scored a solid 4. The artifact weapon applies a strong poison dot on a target and deals more damage with more poison applications. Basically a really strong dot that you can apply on an enemy for only 35 energy, which is really nothing for Assassination. It is great for hitting a healer or hitting DPS and seeing if you can force some cooldowns out of one or the other, and strong, very strong for training healers or DPS. So Assassination might end up being the kind of spec that trains a target with the capabilities to Shadow Step to a target more often, and while they have Vendetta, they keep getting hit with poison-based hits all over the place, over and over and over. So I feel like for Assassination, Artifact Weapon definitely does enhance your damage, and Blizzard has done a pretty good job on that. In terms of utilities, there's not a lot. I gave Assassination a 2, mainly because it doesn't really play nicely with everybody else. It doesn't like to share. Lack of CC is a problem for Assassination, but that is not part of the utilities really. Assassination doesn't have that many mechanics that interact with others, and that's the only reason I gave it a 2 for utility. Because we have the spec of Outlaw, which has all this like give haze, give 15% extra damage to your friendlies, utilities are becoming a thing back in Legion. But with Assassination not having that many capabilities where they get to play nice with other specs and other classes, they do score a lower number in utility. But sometimes it might not even matter for Assassination, because you are already bringing in the damage. You might not even need any of that extra utility, to be honest. Survivability is where Assassination also kind of lacks. Now, with the removal of most of the defensive capabilities from rogues such as combat readiness and preparation, all Assassination has for defensive is Cloak and Evasion. You do get 2 seconds of evasion when you Shadow Step to a target, thanks to your Artifact Weapon, but it's still hard to recover when your Crimson Vial is on cooldown. Subtlety and Outlaw have other sources of healing besides the Vial, and Assassination doesn't. Simply because of that fact, it makes Assassination a little bit weaker in terms of survivability, simply because you just don't heal as often or as much as the other two specs of Rogue. Now, I guess the least important part, but a kind of important part for the assessment, how does it feel to play Assassination? And I feel like the fantasy is born. I've always wanted to feel like my dots mattered at Assassination, and I just wanted to become almost like an Affliction Warlock with daggers, and Blizzard were able to deliver the fantasy of the Rogue spec, and it just feels so satisfying. It actually feels satisfying to press all the buttons, to line up all my dots, and just watch somebody literally rot and bleed to death. I'm happy to be playing the spec in Legion. It's a ton of fun. Yeah, CC might be lacking, but it still does feel powerful because you just have so much damage as Assassination at your disposal, whether it be sustain or burst. You generally get this feeling of almost like a serial killer in a battleground. You know, you bleed up and poison your target, then watch them squirm out of your grasp and try to run. But no matter how far they run, no matter how many defenses they pop, they all are going to die tired as you watch them from a distance as the dots just tick away at the life. It's kind of cool. And the idea that Assassination Rogue spec is an assassin, you almost feel like an assassin, like you pounce on your prey, and that's it. Their fate is sealed, and it's in your hands, and then you just end it. I feel like that's really cool, and Blizzard have done a really cool part. It just feels so fun to play the spec. Now for the number 1 on the list is Subtlety Rogue, and even if I hated Subtlety, even if I thought Subtlety is my least favorite spec in the game, I would have still had to give Subtlety number 1 on the list. It's just, holy crap. This spec is amazing. The way that what Blizzard have done with it and how much damage it deals, it's so fun. It's almost funny. I don't even have words. So let's get on to actual ranking of the spec. Now for damage and burst, I gave Subtlety a 3 on damage and a 5 on burst. Now Subtlety doesn't really feel like it has a lot of sustain, but for the most part, I never really did much sustain. The basic sustain is put a dot on an enemy and backstep from time to time. But you don't really end up doing that as often. Most of the times, it's much better for Subtlety to just catch stealth and open back up on your target. And every time you open on a target, oh damn, the amount of damage you deal is insane. You literally top the charts just from opening on target. And maybe this is just one of the things that is part of the beta of World of Warcraft. Maybe this is just something that's going to stick around while the beta is up, and things might change in the future. But it still is a ton of fun, and just the amount of damage it's ridiculous. It is straight up 100% ridiculous. Now, for Subtlety, I gave him a solid score of 4 for the mobility, because he can't really hide a Subtlety Rogue, which makes him even deadlier when paired with the burst advantage. Their ability of Shadow Strike, which replaces Ambush in Legion, teleports you behind your foe. This spell can be activated only in stealth or when using Shadow Dance. Plus, you get Shadow Step and Sprint, which makes you for an effective close gap when trying to catch up to your foe. Now, in terms of crowd control, Subtlety is pretty stable, pretty same old. You have your blind, your cheap shot, and your kidney. Very strong CC because you have the ability to off stun with a kidney, unlike an assassination rogue, but you don't have the variety of CC with a gouge and a range stun and dismantle and pillage like a outlaw rogue. But still very solid, so Subtlety basically stayed the same in terms of CC minus the gouge. The artifact weapon for Subtlety Rogue is actually pretty solid as well. I gave it a 4, pretty solid 4. There's a couple mechanics to it that make it just better than some of the other artifact weapons out there. So if you sprint for 3 seconds without taking damage as a Subtlety Rogue, you automatically cast Vanish on yourself without using the cooldown for your Vanish ability. So a free Vanish is kind of cool, especially for this whole hit and run, come out of stealth, burst, get back into stealth type of mechanic and playstyle. Your artifact weapon also has an ability to hit a player for a decent number, slow them, and recover energy over time at a 1-minute cooldown. So basically have that every time you burst. Just a very solid artifact weapon, and not a lot to say about it except number 4, it's very effective. In terms of utilities, Subtlety kind of falls on the same field, almost same field as Assassination. I said almost, I give it a 3. Mainly because Subtlety does have capability to get Smoke Bomb and Shadowy Duel, which will close off a target, be it a heal or DPS of your option, from the rest of the group in arenas or battlegrounds. And basically you can use Shadowy Duel, which you have to talent into, or Smoke Bomb, again, which you have to talent into, in order to seclude an enemy from the rest of the group. So whether you're trying to burst down a healer that's been healing the team the whole time, or trying to burst down a key DPS, maybe a key CC target. And because you have these options, I decided to rank the utility for Subtlety at a 3. Not completely, I didn't want to give it as low of a number as Assassination, because you can go for utility. It's just you have to spec particular into it. While Outlaw basically gets most of its utilities just as an option, because it's just a good option to go for. Survivability for Subtlety is a definite 4. Reason why is you can get a talent where when you fade into stealth, while in stealth you gain 3% of your health every 1 second. It's basically a second one without the restrictions on health. So as long as you sit in stealth, and if you sit in stealth for maybe 20 seconds, that is 60% of your health back. So just by sitting in stealth, which you get a lot of stealth as a Subtlety Rogue, you actually get it more often than the other 2 specs and get more capabilities to get into stealth. You actually can heal yourself for full just by sitting in stealth for a little bit, which is great for when you're resetting in arenas, battlegrounds, or duels. When you're resetting on a target after they use their cooldowns and then maybe you're low health, it doesn't matter because you'll just heal up to full. And because you have the capability to heal like that, Subtlety does come out on top compared to Assassination. So what is the final feel for Subtlety Rogue? And it is this. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm kicking ass and having fun. Simple as that. It's so difficult to explain, but basically I feel like it explains everything. During the beta, I had no idea what I was doing as Subtlety Rogue. I had no idea what was my goal, what am I supposed to do. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, maybe I'm doing this wrong, maybe I'm doing that wrong. And I theorized for literally 5 minutes a decent talent build and a decent PvP build, and I end up going to BG. I hit a couple cheap shots, hit a couple DFAs, and I topped the charts. And then I had to ask myself, why? How? No idea. But I had a blast while playing it though. Holy crap, Subtlety was awesome. I'm basically zooming around the map, teleporting all over the place with a smile on my face, DFAing people for 500,000, if not 1 million damage, which there was a hit that basically hit for like 100k away from 1 million, like 900k. And it's a blast, it's a lot of fun. So I know that some people might feel weird about Subtlety, like especially if they played Subtlety for a while. Subtlety has had the highest skill cap required for a long while, so I wonder how people will feel about it when Legion will come out to retail. I wonder how people will feel about the skill cap required for Subtlety in Legion, because I feel like it is definitely lower than the previous requirements for it. But anyways, that's really all I have for the video. This is all I have to say for Subtlety. It's a lot of fun of a spec, and I thought it was unique, and in my opinion it was fun, and I feel like being unique and fun is what mattered the most to me. But this is it for me. My name has been Dalron. This has been my list for the worst to best rogue specs for PvP. Outlaw taking the short bus, while Subtlety taking the cake. And again, this is just my personal opinion. When I say worst to best, I don't mean worst as in like unplayable by everybody. I just mean compared to other specs of rogue, not the most viable or not the most optimal for the PvP environment. That's all I mean by that. So hopefully you guys do enjoy this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think about the numbers. Let me know what you think about the list, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. I want to have a discussion with you guys about it. Again, this is my personal opinion, so please don't take it too harshly. And you know, there's no need to be upset about someone's opinion. It's a little silly. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. My name is Dalron, and I'll see you guys in the next one.